This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is up on Center Stage, the show about the arts and the artists behind their work. I speak often on Center Stage about the many paradoxes in life and art. And recently, I read a transcript from a TED Talk by one of my favorite writers, Annie Lamott. With a raw honesty, she spoke about paradox as being the number one truth she has learned from her life and her writing. And to quote her, she says, "Life is precious, filled with heartbreaking sweetness and beauty, desperate poverty, floods and babies and acne and Mozart, all swirled together." Well, life is fragile. But there are stories of talented, sensitive people who have walked right into their paradoxical existence. And my guest today is one of those people, violinist turned writer, Erica Miner. Having spent a life of blood, sweat, and tears, as most musicians do in their discipline study, she graduated magna cum laude from Boston University and went on to the New England Conservatory and to the Tanglewood Music Center. She studied with Joseph Silverstein, the celebrated concertmaster of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. She spent 21 years as violinist in the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, working closely with James Levine. In the music business, Erica Miner was living her dream. But a serious accident changed her fate. Her injuries may have stopped her playing, but nothing curbs the creative powers of one so talented. Now, as an award-winning writer, poet, screenwriter, journalist, and lecturer, Erica Miner has pivoted within her kingdom. Her recent books, Aria for Murder and Prelude to Murder, have birthed an exciting murder mystery set in the world she knows best, an opera house. And she has built a compelling central character, Julia Kogan, who is, as it turns out, a violinist. Well, Erica Miner, welcome to Center Stage. It is such an honor to have you front and center with me finally.
Thank you, Pamela. That was an excellent introduction. You gave me goosebumps. I was like, is that really me? But yeah, no, it sounded wonderful. And I really appreciate all that you've already set for us to discuss today.
Well, we're setting the scene, aren't we? As you would do in one of your wonderful books, which is so filled with detail. I have to say right off the bat, Erica, as a singer, your sense of detail in describing every working of backstage, of downhouse in an opera house is so intricate and specific. I have to say, but you do it with such an ease, you know? I mean, we're really caught up in this wondrous world of the opera house and what really goes on. It's one thing to buy a ticket and attend an opera. It's another thing to know the backstage stories, isn't it?
It definitely is. And that's one of the compelling reasons why I'm writing this series, because so few audience members have any idea of what really goes on back there. It's kind of like an operatic Tower of Babel. At any given point, there can be as many as 4,000 people working there, all in different jobs, mostly at odds with each other. And it makes it a really ripe kind of atmosphere for the kind of conflict that you want in fiction, but especially in a murder mystery. So I thought, why not? And I get to kill off the people who made my life miserable at the same time. What could be?
Oh, what a delight. I adore that. And of course, in opera, everybody dies, basically. I mean, you know, our best words are addio, yeah, and I am dying. I mean, so here we go. I mean, it all makes sense. So tell me something. In my intro, when I talked about paradox, would you say that your life has stemmed from that in a way?
You could say that it is a paradox, but I also feel it's as much just a journey of, you know, finding a whole different way to live my life and to express my creativity. Because frankly, I have always written since I was a kid. In fact, when I was in grade school, I was placed in a special after-school program for creative writing when I was about 7 or 8, something like that. And I don't know why, but some teacher must have seen a spark of that kind of creativity in me. And so I remember just loving the entire process, even 100 years ago when that was taking place, of being able to create characters and plot lines and weave them all together to tell stories. So I discovered that I love telling stories, and I always have. And as you probably can tell, I still do. So after what happened at the Met, and we can talk about that as far as the accident and how that literally set me in a different direction, I knew that it was my writing that I would go back to as my creative outlet.
I love that. So when you were playing in the orchestra at the Met, let's say, and you're seeing all these dramas, these inner dramas taking place, were you kind of sketching out in your mind then, like a scenario for even a short story?
Actually, I was thinking more in terms of at that point I had started studying screenwriting, and there was one particular opera that actually compelled me to do that, and it was Massenet's Werther. There was something about that opera that evoked something in me that made me want to write a screenplay of that story.
Right.
And it all started from there. It wasn't until I had written several screenplays, including that one, which is still my favorite because I'm just a pushover for period pieces. Um, I actually got an idea for a novel, and I was studying at that point. I had moved out to California, and I was studying with a script teacher in LA. And I said, how about if I write a novel? I had this idea for a title called Travels with My Lovers. And he said, that sounds great, do it. And that's how it all started, with a romance. But then I started thinking about all the nefarious things that had gone on while I was at the Met. And these are stories that I tell over and over in my lectures. Some of the things that happened there are truth is stranger than fiction kind of a scenario. And I thought, why not set a murder mystery at the Met?
Mm-hmm.
And it went on from there. The first book, which originally was called Murder in the Pit, it's now Aria for Murder, was published. And then one of my readers said, well, you are going to write a sequel, aren't you? And I hadn't really thought about it. And he said, yes, you absolutely must. And you have to set it at Santa Fe Opera. And I thought, what a brilliant idea. There's no place like Santa Fe Opera. It's unique, nothing like it in the world. And so I went out there and started researching that. And then someone from San Francisco Opera said, well, we really love your novels. How about setting one at San Francisco Opera? And so it just has been burgeoning and like kind of a snowball effect. And it's been so much fun writing and creating these characters and situations that I never realized what a wicked imagination I had. But then it started becoming obvious. And I thought, yes, I can do this. And it's been just a wonderful journey so far.
This is absolutely fantastic. So, I find it interesting that you choose operas within your books that somehow reflect what's going on in the storyline. And we have just a bevy of fantastic dramas and opera to choose from. But it's interesting in your most recent book, Prelude to Murder, you choose Lulu, which is a very dark piece set against, this Santa Fe backdrop. And the Santa Fe I know is high desert and the mountains and the beauty of the area and the sunshine. So actually, again, we've got this paradox going, but deep, deep drama in the story, in the murder mystery.
Well, Santa Fe is actually considered the most haunted city in the entire United States. And I thought I could add that element and make everything even that much more mysterious. So I thought, why not use Lulu? And all the other operas in this book, by the way, are some of the most violent and bloody ever written. For a murder mystery, I thought that really goes over the top in exactly the way I
Oh,
want. And to start right off with Lulu, with, Jack the Ripper as a character and all of these incredible things going on with the darkness of German expressionism, I thought, why not? It can happen at Santa Fe. And in fact, Santa Fe Opera is a huge part of the history of the production of Lulu, in fact.
really? I didn't realize this.
Well, actually, originally in 1963, when Berg's widow was still alive and would not release the last act of the opera, Santa Fe actually got the American premiere of the first two acts. Then in 1979, after she had passed away, everybody was vying for the privilege of producing and presenting the first complete version of the opera. And everybody assumed that here in the United States it would go to the Met. But John Crosby was so brilliant and so committed to the fact that he felt Santa Fe was the perfect atmosphere for that premiere. And he snagged the right and he did it. And it was an incredible moment in the history of Santa Fe opera. And I thought, why not start right off with Lulu? And
Wow.
that's how.
Starting off with a bang. I love it, literally.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so in your work as a violinist, I presume that you did play at the Santa Fe Festival.
I actually never did. Many of my colleagues at the Met would go out to Santa Fe in the summer to play, but for me, I found 30 odd weeks of opera, including recordings and in the parks, and it's
Yeah.
very intense. I could go on and on about, the Met Orchestra having the most difficult schedule of any orchestra in the world, certainly any opera orchestra. And so for me, I needed my breaks. So I never did go out there to play. However, I knew a lot about it. I knew a lot of the people who did go there to play. And I felt like, and I also have a very close friend, David Holloway, who was a Met Opera baritone, but also was a key player in creating the apprentice program at Santa Fe. So I called upon him and said, David, I'd like to come out there and start learning about the company. So I was very lucky that he provided me an entree into all the backstage workings, meeting the people and everybody from the general director down. The costume director, Missy West, gave me a 2-hour tour of the costume department. All of these things made me feel like I had been there before. And so it seemed like a natural atmosphere for the story, which I then created out of these people that I met and the places that they showed me, all the backstage workings of the opera house, not to mention the atmosphere outdoors. There's nothing quite like Santa Fe Opera. Their backdrop, the back opens up so that back part of the set. I remember once in a Madame Butterfly, they opened it, and so behind her house you see these mountains, and it's the natural terrain, and I'm just blown away by it. There's just nothing like it, and I thought,
Yeah. Yeah.
add that and incorporate all that as well. So it's a really wonderfully rich environment for a murder mystery.
Without question. So when you talk about it being the most haunted place, are we getting back to the indigenous Indian tribes? Are we getting back to those who really, claimed the area first?
I think we can go all the way back to the early 1600s, actually, with the indigenous people, the conquistadores, and the Mexicans, and all of these people who emigrated from the eastern United States going west. It was a melting pot. It still is a melting pot. But back then, as I explain in the book, it was like a pot about to boil over, simmering with the resentments between the different groups, especially between the indigenous people and their conquerors. So it adds to the atmosphere. And I also did a lot of research about why Santa Fe is considered the most haunted place in the United States. There have been sightings of ghosts since pretty much day one. And up until including now, there's actually a real estate agent there who goes around and clears these houses before people move in to make sure there are no ghosts. I mean, that you have to admit, that's pretty haunted.
That's
And
incredible.
it is. And then there's La Posada, that famous hotel that has its own ghost.
Yes, yes, yes.
So all of this comes together to create a backdrop that's just unique, I think.
And rife with possibilities. I know that Santa Fe is also known as an art gallery kind of town. And of course, it's very witchy in other ways. I mean, there are a lot of spiritualists who live there, I'm sure, taking advantage of this otherworldliness of the area. It's so interesting to me that's happening out in the high desert.
Yes, well, the high desert is a very spiritual place, in more ways than one, and I think it's reflected also in that chapter where Julia goes on a vision quest, and
Mm-hmm.
all of that spirituality. I mean, I've been on a vision quest. It actually was in Sedona, not in Santa Fe, but you get, how can I say this? You start getting people speaking to you from elsewhere, from another dimension.
Really?
You really have, there's something about the high desert. It's such a pure kind of atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And the Native Americans, the indigenous people, always felt that it was the most spiritual place on earth. So you're saying the word otherworldly, it describes it perfectly. And so I think that the high desert is just evokes these kinds of spiritual feelings from people where you get connected to another space and another time. It's kind of hard to explain. It's all very
Yeah.
esoteric, but it makes perfect sense to me.
Mhm. I understand well because I actually come from the high desert of Oregon, and there is a similar kind of crispness in the air. There's a vibrational quality. Let's put it that way. You know,
Definitely vibration that's unlike anything else.
this is so exciting. I need to know, Erica, when you were being taken on these tours backstage at the Santa Fe Opera House, were you starting to develop in your mind your story then, or had you had something already storybooked out?
Actually, it was those tours that started creating these ideas in my head,
Ah,
because I had never actually been there before. I had ideas of what kind of trouble Julia could get into because she's prone to that. And the fact that she even survived, not only survived this terrible situation at the Met where she was the target of a killer, but she also ended up, because she has such inner strength, ended up performing so magnificently that not only she was invited to go play at Santa Fe, but to be the concertmaster. And that, for a 23-year-old with only 1 year of opera experience under her belt, is pretty extraordinary, but also very stressful for her. So already she's under stress, excited, but under stress. And then there are all of these places where you look behind the opera house and you see this just acres and acres of sagebrush and chaparral with nothing else. And your mind starts going, well, what could happen there? Did I see something out there? And all of this started going on in my mind, and it just kept escalating from there.
how exciting. So I've got to ask you about our main character here, Julia Kogan. So obviously, we could all look at her and think, okay, how much of Erica Miner is in Julia? Is it possible?
Oh, definitely. And as one of my previous publicists said when I was talking about my first book, Travels with My Lovers, I said, well, people keep asking me how much is fiction and how much is not. And she said, all you have to say is only the author knows for sure. But in the case of Julia, I'm quite proud to say that she is very much based on what I was going through when I was first starting out at the Met. She's young, she's in her 20s, she's very musically talented, but she has no idea of the political machinations that go on at that place. And so it's a real eye opener for her. In the meantime, however, the beauty of fiction is that you can create a character who may be somewhat based on yourself, but has characteristics that you wish you had, like
Right.
grit and her courage. I could never be that brave. I have to say, the way she faces adversity, it's I could only wish to be that way, but I get to create that in fiction. So that makes it really such fun. And I also draw upon what I think would be my own reactions to certain situations. And again, it just escalates from there because Richard Stillwell, the wonderful baritone, was the one who told me, "My dear, you have such a wicked imagination." And I said, "Really? I never thought of it that way, but I guess he must be right because I keep creating these situations."
I think there's a lot of truth in these situations you're creating, even though I don't know about a conductor being killed as you open, aria for murder. on the podium. And when I was reading that, I was taken back to Alfred Hitchcock, The Man Who Knew Too Much, with the wonderful performance at the Royal Albert Hall when a dignitary is going to be assassinated with the crash of the cymbals. And you've orchestrated it so cleverly with a shot on stage. I mean, I love the way your mind works, Erica. And I love the way you've gone into super sleuth mode. And it's beyond Agatha Christie, really. It's much more interesting, you know?
Wow. I'm so flattered. I mean, she's my idol. She's my literary hero when it comes to these kinds of stories. But and Hitchcock as well. I have to say that there was,
Mm.
even though I wrote this my own story before I went back and watched The Man Who Knew Too Much again, I still think that there's a lot of inspiration in there. And what was going on in my mind was, okay, the first murder, who's it going to be? Who's going to do it? In fact, in mystery, you really have to know the villain, the perpetrator, before almost anything else.
Okay.
I was thinking, what opera is there where something like that can happen and it be realistic and no one can really know about it, because what's going on stage in that particular scene of Don Carlo is a complete distraction from what's going on with the murderer elsewhere. So in fact, I have so much fun choosing which operas to do, and also which opera quotes to put at the beginning of each chapter. So yeah, it's just a delicious kind of thing for me.
I have to say, as a singer, I loved all of your operatic quotes. I mean, I was literally thumbing through the pages to see what was coming next because it's so cheeky of you in a way. I just love it. It shows us what knowledge you had of your art. And there's a part of me that just has to ask you something. And I don't know if this is a sensitive question or but when your conductor, Abel, who is your trusted mentor and ally, was there any of James Levine in that character? Is this something that you built around James Levine as an ideal?
Yes, to say it simply, yes, definitely a lot of James Levine in this character. I had a very special relationship with him. He was very key in my getting this position at the Met when he heard my audition. And he really advocated for me. And that meant such a great deal because, of course, as you know, it's fiercely competitive to
Yes.
get those positions, especially in the first violin section. So I always had a great deal of respect for him, of admiration for his brilliance. I mean, not only was he a brilliant conductor, he was a brilliant pianist. He approached all of the operas with such an incredible depth of knowledge about them. But not only that, you could tell that he had a deep love for the music.
Yes, you did.
Communicated that to us. And of course, we spent more time with him than any other conductor. So we all got to know each other extremely well. And just the fact that he was able to communicate that deep love, that emotion about the music, sometimes he would just stop and say, this passage just makes me feel such and such a way. I remember he talked about the translation of Magic Flute in one of the arias, or just maybe even before an aria, in one of the dialogues, where Zarasto says, in German, "Steh auf," but in English it's "arise." And
Oh,
Levine said, "I have to say that when it comes to expressing that particular kind of emotion, arise is just the perfect English word for it." And I've never forgotten that. And he was always imparting these wonderful things to us about the music, clearly, which he had studied and studied and studied and knew inside out. And we were so lucky to be able to be a part of that knowledge of his. So, and plus, he worked us terribly hard, but that's how he got those great performances.
yeah, yeah.
So, all in all, yes, I felt like I wanted, not that I wanted to murder him, but that I wanted to pay homage to him, to make him a very important character and a very important personage to Julia and to her life and her career. And so it's kind of a love letter in a way. And that's what I was seeking to create with that.
Yes, I saw it as someone so important to you as the father of Julia, who had been taken from her. And here Abel, when she's just starting, is killed. And this is the setup is so it's such a metaphor, but it is so dramatically right, for this young girl who's has to now see her own journey through, as she has most of her life. Let's face it. The amount of strength, incredible. I don't think the world is ever going to see as versatile a conductor in opera as James Levine was. And I personally will never forget his Die Meistersinger. I had heard several times that this was one of his favorite pieces. And I know that in Parsifal, it just spoke to me on another level, as if he was so inside of Wagner's writing that there was something so internally divine.
Oh,
So,
yes. When it came to Wagner, it absolutely, it was his, you know, it almost his whole existence. I mean, his love for Wagner and especially Parsifal. There was a depth to his Parsifal that it affects me every time I hear music from it. I think of what he.
yeah, I can imagine. So, can we talk about your years in the Met? How old were you when you auditioned and you were hired?
Well, initially I was in my late 20s, and I stayed there for 21 years.
Mm.
And I had an incredible experience. It was incredibly exciting. I got to actually do an audition with Raymond Yevek, the concertmaster initially, and that was very exciting because I had only ever seen him from up in the family circle in standing room. So be able to play for him was something that I'll never forget. And the way that happened was, I don't know if you remember a conductor named Stuart Bedford,
Oh,
a British
yes.
conductor,
Mm-hmm.
yes, who did the premiere of Death in Venice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So as it happened, he was conducting Death in Venice at the same time that I was playing in a production of another Britain opera, a small chamber opera, The Rape of Lucretia, at Bel
Oh,
Canto
yes.
Opera
Okay.
in Lower Manhattan. And he came to a performance and he heard me play. There's a really wonderful violin solo in that opera. And he came to me afterwards and asked me if I wanted to come down to the Met and play for Raymond Yevek. So that's how it all kind of started. And after that, I went through the whole audition process behind the screen and all of these things that you have to go through. But that's how it all began. So I
Wow.
a great deal to Stuart Bedford, who is just was one of my favorite conductors, and also was a wonderful person as well. So
Oh,
it's funny
that's
how things connect, you know?
the little bits of synchronicity in our life. You must have been so amazed and thrilled and probably nervous every step of the way. I mean, that must have seemed to have gone forever, that process.
It was not so much nerve-wracking as it was mentally exhausting because you
Mm-hmm.
always have to be on your toes. And you prepare for an audition for weeks and weeks and weeks constantly, and then you have to show everything in 10 minutes. And it has to be perfect in every way, in order to rise above the rest. So that was definitely an exhausting process, but I loved it because I felt like I was doing something that I loved, and I was in a place that, I mean, what could be better? What other place could be better than the Met, to be able to play opera, to perform with people like Pavarotti and Domingo and Mirella Freni and all of these incredible artists that I got to watch up close and personal. Because, when you're in the first violin section, you're sitting, as far um, close, I should say, as close to the pit wall as possible. And you have an incredible view of the stage. Not that you're supposed to be looking at the stage, but we all did anyway. Whether it was La Boheme that I played like, 200 times, and I knew well enough that I didn't even have to look at the music,
Right.
or in a rehearsal, there was a lot of downtime where the conductor would be working with the winds or the brass, and we would just be sitting there. And of course, we were going to watch the stage. and we got to see temper tantrums, and we got to see um, tragedies. I mean, real life tragedies going on this stage. So again, all to the fact that I could not resist writing about it.
I love it. So I just recently heard a speech by George R. Martin, who wrote Game of Thrones, and he was addressing this whole idea of write what you know about. And he was so cute in this speech, because at first he said, "I, when I was young as a writer, I didn't know about anything. Here you are, sitting at the feet of some of the greatest musicians in the world, and yourself included. How long did it take you? How long did it take you to find your balance in writing about what you know? I'm many times I've gone to start to write my famous book that I'm going to write. I keep telling myself, but I have a hard time trying to find that focus. How do we get into this? Is it just a case of, like Annie Lamott says, you just have to sit down and write every day, and things start to jump out off the page to you?
That's not actually the way I work.
Okay.
I'm in the writing world. We have what are called planners and pantsers, and pantsers are those who write, from the seat of their pants, like just spontaneously and just let it flow. And
Okay.
planners are those who are planning every single plot point and every scene. That's me. So I can't start writing a novel. I mean, I can write other things, but a novel, I have to have a blueprint. I have to write a detailed outline with every scene and every line of every scene before I will even start to write. So that's my particular process. In that, I infuse whatever my experiences have been, the ones that I feel that are most adaptable to whatever story I happen to be writing. And also the characters. The characters are terribly important, and I
Mm.
was so to meet all these crazy people who make these wonderful characters who are fascinating and maddening and make you want to scream half the time, but wonderful. And so art imitates life and life imitates art. And I had a stage to look at for 21 years that gave me ideas about what goes on in the operas, which then led to ideas about what can go on behind the scenes, behind that golden curtain. What goes on? I think that's one of the most fascinating questions of all. And again, I couldn't resist writing about it.
I adore it. I adore it. So tell me this. Is writing a sense for you of taking you out of madness in the world? I mean, is this ability to be so structured, as you're describing your process right now, and laying everything down on paper and seeing everyone come alive, is that like a balm for keeping us sane in this life? I mean, especially for someone like you who's so creative and whose life suddenly, was denied being able to play the violin.
I totally think you've really hit the nail on the head. It is a great balm. Um, it's consolation in many ways
Mm.
for me, having lost my violin life to be able to create in a writing life. So that's terribly important for me, and I think that it's something that you can do forever. Which, I mean, what could be greater than that? Great writers who write until the very last minute. It's a kind of creativity that it comes directly from your soul, from your heart and soul. So instead of, I mean, not that I could presume to compare myself to any of the great opera composers, but the fact is that now I get to create my own material. And there's something wonderful about that. Telling stories, telling your own story in a way that reflects your life experience, but also the unique experience of partaking in this Metropolitan Opera world, which, what can I say? It's also unique and
Wow,
wonderful and
the
maddening.
best. Yes,
And yeah,
I'm
it's
sure.
all of those things. It's all of those things.
How many intendants did you experience in your life at the Met?
Well, that's a good question because there was a lot of transition going on, especially you may remember the lockout in 1980.
Mm-hmm.
And we had Anthony Bliss, and I forget, oh, and Schuyler Chapin were all kind of, it was all kind of a mishmash that was hard to keep up with. After that, when things settled down, and I can't remember exactly what year that Joe Volpe came in, but from then on, it was Joe Volpe the whole time I was there, as I remember. I could be wrong. If I am, I'm embarrassed. But I certainly, Joe Volpe was the one who dominated, shall we say, all of
Yeah,
those years.
yeah, yeah. And things ran fairly smoothly under Mr. Volpe.
Yes, they did. At least on the surface, we certainly had our issues with him, but that was normal because there's always this uh, divide between the musicians union and management and all the other unions and management. So I don't know at this point how many unions there are at the Met, but that is a big piece to chew on for any general manager. So I put him up, Joe Volpe, for being able to handle all that. That can't have been easy.
Well, he started, at the bottom. He worked his way up. He really understood the workings. If anybody could do it, it was him. I don't know if we can say that presently about the Met, but we won't go there right now. um, I need to ask you, as a musician myself, I know about the necessity for living with this unbelievable focus that we grow up with, the discipline of practice, this living, as you say, this sustaining this mental energy. Now, everything was fine for you, and suddenly there's a car accident. Can you explain to me, and I'll let you talk about the accident if you will. But sometimes life has diversions, and I talk on this show often about especially musicians who have had more than one life, and sometimes life has a different idea for us. Um, but suddenly your focus was taken from you, and I'm just wondering how that was for you in the beginning and how you found your new focus, so to speak.
Well, of course, it was very difficult. But there's this saying: there are no coincidences, there are no accidents. Things happen for a reason.
Mm.
Uh, it was, of course, to have that wrested from me was horrific, and I went through a very long mourning and grieving process after the accident when I was in physical and occupational therapy and trying to get my muscular um, ability back, which was all, not to mention all the pain involved. It was one of the worst times of my life. And fortunately, I had a wonderful husband, very understanding person who helped me get through it, and family, my daughter and my son, and uh, I got through it. But I remember at one point, just it all came crashing down on me. And I said to my husband, I just want my life back. And that was kind of a turning point, because when, after about a year and a half of various kinds of therapy and looking into surgeries, and there really were none, and the ones that there were maybe 40% success rate, it became evident that I couldn't keep up with the difficulties of that grueling Met schedule of having to
Yes.
play literally 8 days a week. I mean, at that point, we were not only doing performances in the house, but we were also doing performances as an orchestra at Carnegie Hall on weekends. So
Correct.
it was just more than my physical capability. And I realized that I would have to give it up, which was not an easy decision to come by. But again, I had so much help and support from my family. And, I decided that I guess there's something else that the universe has in mind for me. And it turns out that since then, once I started lecturing about my books, and now I'm lecturing about opera pretty much all the time, for Wagner societies and various others, I get to share my knowledge and experiences with lots and lots of people. And that has turned out to be the greatest boon of all, because not just in my books, which of course are fiction, I get to share the atmosphere of what goes on behind the scenes at major opera houses, but also to students and people who are mad about music and mad about opera, and who really appreciate learning all of these things from inside of my head that I just don't want to leave inside of my head. I want to be able to contribute and give back for all of the wonderful things about the Met that I was able to take advantage of as a musician there. And so I think in the end, and then I get to meet wonderful people like you, and be able to have these one-on-one conversations with just wonderfully erudite people who understand and appreciate opera. And this is a great blessing. So I look upon it as not an accident, but something that was meant to be. And now I'm in a much different place. I've accepted the whole violin. I remember when I told my children I was going to be selling my violin, and they said, "Oh, no, no, that's your identity. You can't do that." And I said, I have a new identity now, and this violin needs to go. And it was an old Italian instrument, wonderful instrument. It needs to go to someone who will play it and love it and make it sing the way it was meant to be. And I am doing my own kind of singing in a literary way, and I feel very lucky.
Oh, I think that's an extraordinary story. I love it. You've answered about two of my questions right now. I may as well just throw my script away, Erica, because you're giving me so much to work with here. It's just absolutely marvelous. Where did your violin go? Do you know, and to whom?
Oh, yes, this is quite a wonderful story. I remember, of course, bringing it with me from New York when initially we moved to San Diego. And I went up to LA, and I saw some violin makers there who were interested in maybe trying to sell it. But they didn't seem interested in the instrument. They seemed interested in just making the sale. And then I found someone wonderful in San Diego who, I don't know if you heard of the violinist Cho Liang Ling,
Oh, yeah.
Lin, yeah, Jimmy Lin. Well, it turns out that he's a good friend of this violin maker in La Jolla. And so the violin maker introduced me to Jimmy, and Jimmy played the violin. So I got a private concert on my violin from Jimmy Lin. How about that? And he really loved it. And he said, I know the perfect person for this. He had one of his best students was about to become a violinist in the string quartet at Rice University. And he said, this would be perfect for him. And I was over the moon, because aside from opera, chamber music has always been my deep, deep love. As a string player, chamber music is like heaven. And the thought of someone playing chamber music on my violin, I thought was the best possible place for it. And so, yes, that's who it went to. And I was thrilled. And I feel like it's being played on the way it should be played on. And so, what I couldn't ask for more.
Again, there are no coincidences, are there, Erica? This was definitely meant to be. Well, my dear, you look happy. You look as if you have energy just coming, exuding from your solar plexus. So I think the decision for you to let go of your instrument must have been very pivotal in your life. I mean, you are obviously a very spiritual minded person and in touch. So this must have been something of a ceremony in your kingdom.
I like that phrase. That's brilliant. A ceremony in my kingdom. I think of it in those terms because music to me is the greatest love of all. And my parents were very musical. They weren't professional musicians, but I grew up with classical music in the house 24/7 all the time. And so it's so embedded into my heart and soul that any expression of music means more to me than I can say. My love for music, when I hear certain pieces, especially, even if I can't play them anymore, just hearing them, and I just dissolve into tears because there's just nothing as pure and wonderful as music. And in fact, the ancient Greeks themselves said so, that music is the purest form of all the arts. And I totally believe that and try to live by it as well. And as far as energy, the energy comes from my love of music and my passion and enthusiasm to be able to share that with other people. That's where the energy comes from. It's not
Mm-hmm.
there all the time, but when I'm talking about music, it's definitely there.
It's definitely there. So for you as a lecturer, this is really important, and the gifts you have to impart to everyone now. I mean, this is incredible. How absolutely beautiful. It's interesting to me the way lives work. It sometimes we have an intention of being something, and somehow we're just turned around or we're sent down a fork in the road, and maybe we resist it kicking and screaming, but if we just go, we'll see what lies, what lies ahead. And I think you definitely have. We're all the better for it. I adore this. I just adore it. Oh my God. But the best part is you're writing your own version with your words through your eyes now on the opera stage of these beautiful dramas in the fiction Aria for Murder and Prelude to Murder. Now, I gather there's a third book bubbling, right?
There is a third book. It's more than bubbling. It's pretty well formed already in my mind. It takes place at San Francisco Opera. I haven't revealed the title yet, but my publisher and I have decided on the title. And I'm really looking forward to it because at the end of Prelude to Murder, there's kind of a cliffhanger. You don't know where Julia's going to be going after that exactly. And there's some surprises at the beginning of the next book too. So I'm really, I can't wait to get my, start my process of making that into something hopefully wonderful with a lot of plot twists. And what better place than San Francisco? I mean, I immediately comes to mind the movie Vertigo.
Of
The
course.
atmosphere. Yeah, it's amazing. And San Francisco Opera House is the War Memorial Opera House is almost indescribable. I had, again, such great luck because a very close friend of mine was the dramaturg there. He's now the dramaturg emeritus, Kip Cranna. And he took me through the entire opera house from top to bottom and introduced me to also the concertmaster, Kay Stern, who introduced me to John Boatwright, who is the house manager. And John told me stories like you wouldn't believe. Talk about ghosts. I'm telling you, this place is really creepy in the best possible way. Stuff that goes on. There's things running underneath the opera house. I mean, you'll see when you read the book. It's wild and crazy. And, San Francisco itself is a character in this book too. So
I love it.
be so much fun.
I love it. I can't wait. Oh my gosh. So, should we be looking forward to a screenplay soon? I mean, I feel an extended series with Julia Kogan, kind of emerging out of Hollywood. Is there any chance of this?
Well, I've actually written this screenplay for Aria for Murder. And I think it could make a pretty fine movie or even a Netflix series of all three books, three seasons,
Absolutely.
several episodes each season. Because I think people, and I'm trying not to sound too immodest about this, but people really engage with Julia as a character.
Hmm.
And I think that she's just the right material for a character for an ongoing series. So who knows? I just need the right person. For something like this, you need a director who really understands opera, who loves opera and gets that whole world. So not so easy to find, but who knows? Maybe there's someone out there who can make something out of that concept. And, I mean, after all, there was Mozart in the Jungle. Now
That's
we've
right.
got Julia in the Opera House. Why not?
We've only just brushed the surface. Maybe they've been waiting for the right characters, and you may be able to provide them. I love this, Erica. The sky's the limit.
Put it out
So
to the universe.
So I've got to say, I was talking to a New York Times photojournalist recently, and we were talking about the photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson, who said that when you start, you take 10,000 photos, and if you go back and look at them, most of them are crap. So talk to me about first drafts. I mean, how I don't know this inner mind of a writer at your level. Do you experience that with the first draft? Do you look at things and just go, oh God, what was I thinking?
Oh, I have a lot to say about that. In the screenwriting world, we call the first draft the throwaway draft. And in
Oh,
fact, that's the way it is also with a number of opera composers whose first operas, like Wagner's first two, were like throwaway drafts. So, and the other thing you have to remember is that adage that writing is rewriting. So anything you write, it's important to get it down, but there's no chance that it's going to be anything close to your final draft. And everybody is different as far as how many drafts they need. But as far as and screenwriting, honestly, is the most difficult kind of writing. It's the most restrictive, and all the rules. It's like they say in Hollywood, there are no rules, but they're strictly enforced. It's this dichotomy. There's always something, some kind of a contradiction going on in Hollywood. So who knows? But the fact is that you write drafts endlessly, one after another, after another, after another. When you have a contract with deadlines, then you're restricted in that you have to keep producing drafts on deadline to up to a point where the editor says, okay, we're done. It's ready for publication. So it's not easy, but it's a finite process that you can relate to. I know that it has to be certain amount done by X date, and that the publication date is slated to be such and such. With screenplays, it's a much different thing because you have to deal with, everybody in Hollywood wants to get their finger in the pie, and so you're going to
mm,
get all kinds of opinions about. I mean, it's practically impossible to make everybody happy. So you just keep writing drafts. And, if I had a contract to do this either as a movie or a series, I would just keep writing drafts until they were happy, or until, that they give it to another writer, or who knows what happens. There is absolutely insane, admittedly. Not that I wouldn't love to be a part of it, but yeah. So the bottom line is I've kind of gotten off subject, but yes, you keep writing and writing and writing
I love that.
until you can make it the best it can be. And that's really the bottom line. It has to be the best it can be.
Does that keep you awake at night? I mean, the rewrites, the editing, your characters.
What keeps me awake at night, it's my characters. I mean, my characters
Oh,
they're talking to me, and they're doing, saying things like, well, that's thanks for creating me, but now I want to do what I want to do. And I don't think, I don't want to do this like that. I want to do it like that. I want this to happen. I mean, yeah, they drive me crazy. It's in a good way. So yeah, I'm thinking about it. It helps me fall asleep at night, actually, unless I'm like too wired, but generally it helps me fall asleep to think about, okay, where is this character going to go from here? And where is this plot point going to go from here? And I get to wake up tomorrow morning and do it.
And solve it like these murders. I love it.
It's tough. Let me tell you, the mystery genre is the toughest genre. That's why I started writing a screenplay of Arya for Murder, because I actually started with that, and then I had to go into writing it as a novel, because in a mystery, all of the plot points have to fit like a jigsaw puzzle. And if something is just slightly off, then the whole puzzle is just not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another reason why I write outlines and blueprints, because in this genre, everything has to fit. It just has to fit. You have to know the ending before you even begin.
Right.
And so, yeah, so that can also keep me up at night, but in a good way. I get to try to solve it the best I can.
Did you ever hang out at that marvelous store on the Upper West Side called Murder Inc.?
I don't think it was there when I was there. How long
Okay.
is it?
It
I've heard about it.
oh, it was a great store. I mean, they specialized in murder, mystery, and suspense novels, and I used to hang there a bit myself. I mean, it was great. It was that typical small store on the Upper West Side, dusty, books everywhere. It was just divine in its way. I love it. If there's something I have to ask you as a musician now, I always think in terms of arcs and the shape of things, and as a conductor, I of course I think that way. But is there an arc to your writing? I mean, are there times when maybe you're wrestling with a scene and you're looking for that moment, that climax, yeah, in literally the usage of the words?
Oh, there always has to be an arc in writing, and just as importantly for the characters, especially the main characters, their transformational arcs are really what push the story forward. And so you have to find that perfect synchronicity between the arcs of the characters and the arcs of the plot. So you do see it as very much, I see it as a rainbow. It starts at the bottom and it rises and then it goes up and then it ends. And that, of course, goes back to Plato and Aristotle and everything that they said about beginning, middle, and end. So arc is really a reflection of beginning, middle, and end. Or as they used to tell us, okay, if you're having trouble thinking about how to write this, think in terms of um, get your character up a tree, have someone throw stones at them, and then get them down. So again, it's beginning, middle, end. It's the arc of
Wow.
starting at a level, getting into heaps of trouble, and then resolution. So this has been analyzed endlessly over the centuries, but that's something that I always try to keep in mind. And certainly, poor Julia gets more than her share of stones thrown at her, and she manages to get down from that tree, dust herself off, and go on. And so I'm always thinking in terms of arcs when I'm writing.
That's fascinating. I love that idea. Well, nobody said that for the sensitive and for the special people, life was going to be easy. And I think that has been the same for you, Erica Miner. And you have really risen to the surface, and your life has just exploded in the most beautiful blossom way. I admire you so much. And looking, from the outside in, even just exploring your website, the amount of lecturing you're doing, the amount of speaking about reinventing yourself, all of these transformational ideas, which is in your writing at all times. It's so admirable, I have to say. You are
Thank you
really, really fascinating.
for giving
Wow.
me this, but
Wow.
it's wonderful to hear, and to get that kind of confirmation means so much to me. I can barely express it. It's just so meaningful. Thank you so much.
Well, when Netflix come to you and offer you $1 gazillion for Julia Kogan, I mean, just remember us. Remember we mere mortals here who talked to you at one point. I believe now you're in the Seattle area.
Yes, I'm living just north of Seattle, and I moved here because my daughter asked me to. Because, well, she has two granddaughters, and she wanted some support, and she also works full time, and I thought, what could be better than to have family close by and to watch my granddaughters grow and be able to be part of their lives. So we very not readily abandoned San Diego because San Diego is paradise and it's a hard place to leave, but
Mm-hmm.
it's been a wonderful move. I'm so lucky to have family so close by. And I think that it's a wonderful place for writers. I mean, I'm told that there are more bookstores per capita in Seattle than any other city in the US. So it's a great writing community. I've got more colleagues, writing colleagues, in the last few years than I had all the time that I was in San Diego. It's writing is just such an important part of Seattle life. And so I think that I found the right place to be.
That is thrilling. And of course, the musical life is rich. You have the Seattle Symphony, you've got immense chamber groups. I mean, Chamber Music Northwest, and of course, into Portland, Oregon. I mean, the Pacific Northwest, it has merit. It definitely has merit.
Oh, it definitely does. It's a very cultured place, and Seattle Opera is doing very fine work. And I'm lucky enough to be able to be asked to review a lot of the opera and symphony performances as well. So between that and the novels and the screenplays and the lectures, I think, as a friend of mine, I was talking to him today, and he said, I think now that we're retired, we're busier than we ever were. And I had to say, yeah, I think we are. But might as well do it while we can do it. So
Absolutely. And where to now, Erica Miner? What comes after this?
what comes after?
After Julia Kogan, your next book,
Oh,
have you got plans for a new character? Is there something kind of spinning in your head right now about plans for a new departure in the literary world?
well, there's always something spinning in my head, and I think that there's a brand new character in the next book who could actually move things into another realm. I'm not sure, something I have to discuss with my publisher. And
Mhm.
also San Diego Opera. I lived there for 16 years, and I had a very long, close relationship with San Diego Opera. And they're
Mm.
talking about, well, would you like to set a mystery here? Maybe Seattle Opera. We'll see. Um, I I'm right into the mystery genre right now, so I'm not sure exactly, but who knows? Anything can happen. That's the great thing about the writing life.
I love it, Erica. Wow. Well, you have been so generous with your words, your ideas, sharing with me. I just adore this, and I have to admit I've looked forward to this interview for quite a long time.
As a
And I I have one more question for you. And Miss Ryder, if there is one word or phrase that you feel really describes who you are, at, at the centerpiece of who you are, can you share that with us?
one word.
One word
Wow.
or phrase.
Wow. That is definitely thought provoking.
Something that comes to the tip of your tongue right away.
The two words that come to the tip of my tongue are musician, writer, love. Three words.
I love
Any
it.
combination thereof, any order thereof.
Yeah.
That's what's mind.
And
It's
there is
all about
there
that.
is an instant arc in that honesty. I adore it. I absolutely adore it. Well, all the luck in the world to you in this fantastic adventure you're on, and your kingdom, as I've called it, which I think is true. I think you have a particular kingdom which is filled with words and images and ideas, and it'll be exciting to watch where you go from here. I love it. So all the best, and thank you, Erica, for being on center stage and sharing with me.
Thank
You are
you, Pamela.
special.
It's a great privilege. I honestly and a great pleasure. And yes, and those images will continue to dance in my head.
I love it. I want to ask all of my viewers and my listeners to go to ericaminer.com for more information about this wonderful and talented writer. I think there is a lot to be learned from those who live 9 lives. And as long as we're open to transition, as long as we're open to transformational ideas and inspiration, we will always be okay. And Erica Miner is listening to her inner voice and she's finding the honesty. I love it. Thank you again, my dear. And I hope you will go to Center Stage with PamelaKoon.com for more shows like this, my filmed interviews, some of my own writings, and my shows on WGCH Talk Radio in Greenwich, Connecticut. So for everyone out there, I want you to stay safe. This is Pamela Koon, and the curtain is now down on Center Stage.